Well, Robert, you don't have any preconceived anything to overcome, so they're ready for you.
Oh,
Robert.
okay. Thank you.
Let's make welcome Robert Buxton.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. And thank you, Kenny, for setting this up. You know, I'm Robert Buxton. I play classical and Southern gospel piano. And I like that bell. Just good timing. It's a beautiful drive here. You know, I live in Mebane, which is a little ways. And at some point you see the mountains and everything, the whole mood changes. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So what I'm going to do first is something a little odd, maybe. I like to improvise. And what I found out is that in the 1800s and before, classical musicians, they used to improvise all the time. And I don't know, somewhere along the way, we stopped in the classical setting. And I think it's too bad because it's fun. So there are different ways to do this. And what I was thinking to do is I'll ask you for some random notes. We're going to create a melody. So, oh, hello. Yeah. Could I have a one note, please? Just any music.
C.
Okay, C, very good. We'll take a couple more.
C sharp.
C sharp. Okay, well, that's 2 or 3 more. Anybody?
E.
E. And 1 or 2 more. F. Yeah, that's okay. Let's do that. I like that. It's unusual, but it will work. So C. Yeah. Now, in addition to that, is there a melody, a popular melody that everyone knows and that presumably I know? I could throw in there too. Any tune?
Only you.
Only you? I don't know it enough. I know it, but
What about stormy weather?
I could throw in stormy weather. I could. I'll just quote it. Little. I like that. Okay, well, let's see what happens. It's an improvisation, so we don't know what's going to happen. All right. So our theme is. Yeah. spontaneous thing. So now, the rest of it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up the classical and the gospel. That was sort of in the style of Liszt a little bit, Franz Liszt, 19th century. So now I'm going to play a short gospel tune. This is something it's been going through my head a lot recently because it's a great song, but also because the songwriter, Chris Christopherson, he died not so long ago.
Yeah.
And this is his famous gospel tune, Why Me, Lord? I wish I could sing. I don't sing, but other people do that better. But I'm going to play a little piano version of Why Me, Lord to start us off here. So now, I'm going to go to some classical stuff. And then really the thing is, the difference between what we call classical and gospel, it's not really all that different because I'm going to play Bach now. And what did Bach do? He was a church music director his whole life, organist. And he even taught school in church, Sunday school. He taught Latin to kids at Sunday school. And everything he wrote had some religious connotation. He would write, actually at the end of every composition in the margin, he would write to the glory of God, dedicated to the glory of God. And so this piece is a famous piece It's called the Air, or the Aria, from the D major orchestral suite. And you've probably heard it, but not on the piano. It's for violin and for strings. It goes like this. I'll play you the opening just so you know. Familiar? Yeah, they have it in a lot of movies and even TV shows and things. So, an aria is something that's supposed to be sung, usually in an opera. I mean, well, in English we call it an air. It's the same thing, an air. But Bach never wrote an opera. But he has arias or airs in his cantatas, which he would, at one point, he had to write a cantata every week. I forget which church it was at. One of the big churches he served at. Every week he had to write a cantata. And at one point, he even, speaking of coffee, he actually wrote, I love coffee, so Bach loved coffee. He wrote a coffee cantata, that just dedicated to coffee. So it's great. So this is a little 18th century German gospel music in a way. Something else I was going to say. Yeah, all the classical pieces I'm doing now are originally for the violin. And there's a story behind this. I love the violin. And I wanted at one point to switch instruments to the violin, but my wife, who's a pianist also, she talked me out of it. She said, it's just not worth it. We have small kids, it's not practical. And she was right. So I'm living out plan B right now, which is to play arrangements on the piano. And the guy who arranged this piece is a Russian composer named Alexander Siloty. He did a lot of arrangements of Bach organ music and other things for the piano. So, that's how this all comes into play. There's also part of me that would have loved to have been a singer, to be able to sing gospel music like Chris Christopherson or George Jones or Mahalia Jackson. But I don't have the voice, so. Anyway, here's the Bach. on. I forget who it was. I always forget who it is. That's why I'm not a historian. But they said that when God talks to the angels, it probably sounds like Bach. But when the angels talk to each other, it probably sounds like Mozart. I like that quote. It's a really beautiful idea. So next I'm going to play Beethoven. And going along with that quote, I think Beethoven was more like you and me. In other words, he was more human. To me, Bach and Mozart and those guys, their music is just so up there. You know, it's so otherworldly. But Beethoven is very much of this world. And what I mean by that is, look at the way he composed even. And Beethoven struggled over every note. He would cross out and revise and rewrite, and his drafts, they're messy, they're sloppy, they have, candle wax stains, food stains, even his own tears they found there, because he literally struggled over every note. And Leonard Bernstein said, Beethoven didn't really write great tunes by himself, that is. If you think about the famous, it's actually, that's not really a tune. That's not like Stormy Weather. That's a memorable tune. The Beethoven is almost like just a primitive, just a rhythm, but it's what he does with it that makes it into magic. That's what Bernstein said. I think that's true, I agree. And what I'm going to play by Beethoven now is his own piano version of the violin concerto. I think I'm going to do the second and third movements, which segue into each other. It's a little long, so let me get my watch here just to be sure. This is probably the longest thing I'll do today. It's probably about 20 minutes. The whole thing. The meat and potatoes of the day. If that's okay. Now the thing about the violin concerto, Beethoven wrote it in 1806. And he wrote it, it's on the surface, you hear it, especially when I start with the second movement. It's very calm, it's very sweet, it's very meditative. And the audience at the time didn't get it. Some of them even fell asleep. I hope you won't. That's why he did the piano version. He was unhappy with how people took to it. But the thing is this, I think that the audience at that time, they didn't know what was going on in his life when he wrote it. He was losing his hearing, and he knew it. And at one point, he was so distraught about that, he wanted to take his own life. He saw no hope. But Beethoven found hope anyway. And he developed the ability to hear music in his head completely. And it's so inspiring, because I think every person has aspects of their life that they don't go exactly as we want. But Beethoven gives this solution to us to never give up no matter what. He didn't. And look at the results. And another thing was his teachers, Haydn and Mozart, they even told him, you don't really have a melody gift, he didn't have that kind of natural talent, if you will, but it's what he did, the struggle, he put all of that into him. And that's what makes him Beethoven, I think. Someone said it's not despite being deaf that he became Beethoven, it's because of it. In other words, that thing that stood in his way completely made him into Beethoven. It made his music speak to us in this very direct way. Music before Beethoven was different. It was more light and entertaining usually. Beethoven was not. He's like, I'm going to share with you what's really in my heart and just tell you directly. I think that's Beethoven. So anyway, I could talk, but I'm going to play the second movement and the third movement. Again, this is from the violin concerto, but it's Beethoven's own piano version. The second movement, what I start with, it's like a church hymn. Very slow. It's kind of like the Bach a little bit. But then it segues into the third movement. The third movement is a lively country dance. Not our kind of country music. I'm going to play some of that later, don't you worry. But it's an Austrian or a German country dance. Which that is a Ländler. That's a dance in 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's a heavy, rustic country dance. He ends with so much joy. Somebody said this piece is a piece about acceptance, philosophical acceptance. It's him accepting his deafness and finding not only hope, but joy too, despite it. That's Beethoven. All right, here it is. Thank you. And I told you it was long, so thank you, because usually I like short pieces, but there's some, I mean, Beethoven, it can't be shorter. Have you ever seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia? I like movies, and I saw it recently, and it's very long. But by the time you get through the whole thing, you realize it couldn't have been shorter. Because it's, with Beethoven, it's like you're reading a novel or watching a movie like that. He takes you on a journey with him through something. So anyway, I'm going to play two gospel numbers now in between. Here's one I just thought I'd play coming in the car here when I saw the mountains. I didn't realize how close you were to the mountains. And this is sort of not the right season for this because Christmas has passed. But this is Beautiful Star of Bethlehem, which is an Appalachian gospel tune. Very popular. And I guess I might tell you a little bit about myself, my background, because people say, if you tell me where you come from or who your family is, we'll tell you who you are. So I have it's an odd story. Both of my parents are immigrants, I tell this. My mother immigrated from the Soviet Union in 1980, never came back, never went back, doesn't want to go back. My dad immigrated from Southern Virginia. So they're both immigrants. And the point I'm trying to make is that the classical music thing comes through my mother. She's not a musician, but the love of the classical stuff, that comes through my mom and her side of the family. My uncle Boris was very Russian, so I'm half Russian. And then at the same time, my dad was always telling me, when are you going to learn some real music? When are you going to play Hank Williams, Sr., that is, and Roy Acuff, and Bill Monroe, and Ralph Stanley. That's real music. And so then I picked that up too through him and play with him too. They're both in North Carolina, so, which is great. So here's Beautiful Star of Bethlehem. I'm going to do Amazing Grace now, but I'm going to do it in a style you might not hear too often. I love to play it in many different styles, of course, because it can work in many different styles. I think what we call Southern Gospel is, it's a big region we're talking about. And if that's more closer to here, I played that with a piano version. If you heard a bluegrass band do that, it would be quite different. It would just sound different. But that still has, I think, a somewhat Appalachian flavor to it. But if you talk about the gospel music in a place like New Orleans or Louisiana, it's completely different. And by the way, did you see there are these silly things about the snow? Because they had apparently a lot more snow than we did there. Once in a generation snowstorm. Last 130 years, it's the biggest snowstorm in Louisiana. And I saw pictures on social media of trucks with Cajun seasoning dropping the seasoning on the roads instead of salt, because, yeah, I guess where my dad is from, they use Old Bay. But that's, at any rate, I'm going to do it more in that style. And famous gospel musicians from there would be, well, Mahalia Jackson, first of all, who lived in Chicago, but she was from New Orleans. And another is Jerry Lee Lewis, who played, we mostly think of him as a rock and roll player, but he played a lot of gospel. And his two cousins, Mickey Gilley and Jimmy Swaggart, they're related. They all do gospel piano. And so I'm going to do Amazing Grace kind of a bit more in that style, so it's going to sound different. things here. I'm going to do a short piece by Tchaikovsky. And I was telling you, my mom's from Russia, so this is Russian music, very much so. Tchaikovsky melody in E flat. And I was telling you about Beethoven. Beethoven didn't necessarily write tunes that were immediately catchy. I mean, they're beautiful, obviously, but it's what he did with them that makes them great. But Tchaikovsky, it was like the melodies that just came right from him naturally. And there's a story about that natural way that he composed. Beethoven did. Beethoven had to revise and rewrite. Tchaikovsky was one of those people that he could just hear a piece of music in a dream pretty much and write it. There's a story, it's a little bit dark, but the ballet Swan Lake by Tchaikovsky, he was visiting some friends in a lake in the mountains in the summertime, and apparently didn't know how to swim too well, but he went out in the lake and he started drowning. And the music to Swan Lake just came to him. Oh, wrong note, but it just came to him naturally. Now, luckily he survived, so he wrote it. I mean, if he hadn't, my goodness, we wouldn't have had that music. But at any rate, I think it just the melodies just flowed out of him naturally. So this is the melody in E flat by Tchaikovsky. I'm going to play a couple short Spanish pieces now. to close the classical part, I have more gospel coming up. This is a piece by Sarasate, Pablo de Sarasate. It's called Habanera. And habanera is a type of pepper, right? I mean, there's a habanera pepper, but it's also a dance. And the roots of the dance are in Cuba, actually, in Havana. That's why it's called habanera. This is the rhythm of a habanera. You probably know this tune. There's one finger. That's from Carmen by Bizet. That's a habanera dance. So this is different, obviously. This is Sarasate's habanera. It's just, what can I say, it's so Spanish. I have this bizarre feeling that even the climate of a place where a composer is from changes the way the music sounds. Like even with the gospel, I think the Amazing Grace in the Louisiana version, it feels different from other Amazing Grace versions that are there. And Beethoven feels different. He was from Germany, lived in Austria. It feels different than from the Spanish music. It's just a different, even the weather affects it. And in Spain, it's much drier and sunnier, so you can almost sense that in the music is what I mean. So here's the habanera by Sarasate. All right, getting close to the last few here. Here's another Spanish piece. This one's much more flamenco-like. This is by Ernesto Lecuona. It's called the Malagueña. This is a famous piece. There are even lyrics to it, many popular versions of it with guitar and etc. And Malagueña means a woman from Malaga. And Malaga is a city in southern Spain. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, I've never been, but I've seen pictures of it. And it's one of the big centers or capitals of flamenco music. So this is a flamenco piece, pretty much. So here it is. Close with some gospel. This is a famous old gospel tune. They don't print this one in the hymnals too much anymore. Will There Be Any Stars in My Crown? There's a 50s movie with that title. It's a Western. Free on YouTube. If you like YouTube movies for free, you can find it there. So here it is. Will There Be Any Stars in My Crown? going to close with a final gospel number. This is When They Ring Those Golden Bells. And I'm going to play it in two different styles. One is the style more of Tennessee Ernie Ford. It's a little bit more straightforward. And then I'm going to do that Louisiana, that more deep South style of gospel. And some people say it's boogie woogie or something like that. But the church musicians say, look, we did it first. You know, it's not that it became part of popular music later. I think that's true, that the blues and all of that, all of that really started in church music. You know, you look at the African American spirituals and the music of Appalachia, it all just kind of started, I think, in religious music. So anyway, that's what it is. So I'm going to do two styles, When They Ring Those Golden Bells.
Before you go, could you play Moonlight Sonata, Beethoven's
I can
Moonlight
play a little
Sonata?
bit. I mean, I haven't played it in a while, but let me see if I remember the opening. You know, let's see, something like this. Is that it?
That's it.
No, I can't play the whole thing. I don't remember it. So. Right. And after that, it gets a little fuzzy. I don't know where it goes now. Then it gets fuzzy. I'm sorry, but maybe next time I'll do it. Yeah, it's a great piece, of course.
Just a little bit of, is Bach or Beethoven?
That was Beethoven.
At least,
Oh, the Furley, yeah, that's also, I haven't played that in a million years, but you know, it's like. No, sorry. Something like. And then there's then it gets fuzzy. It's been a little while, but you know, yeah, I have to practice it to know it. But yeah, yeah. Thank you all for coming, and I even though I kept my watch here, I didn't look, and so I'm kind of sorry if I went way over the time. So,
Nothing to be sorry about.
well, I mean, if you have to be somewhere, if you have plans, but you know, thank you to Kenny for. I'm really glad you had me, and the pianos. This is a really beautiful piano that you have here.
They had it
So,
tuned
yeah,
earlier
they had
this
it
week, it's
tuned.
for you.
I can tell. Yeah, thank you for doing that. That's really. So yeah, stay warm. You know, it's still cold, and yeah, thank you again. It's been really nice to spend the afternoon with you all. So.
Thank you.